It's that season, particularly in American cultures, where we can spend a lot of time with family and friends, and that can be fantastic, and it is for so many people, but for others it's not very fantastic. It can be quite dysfunctional, toxic. Sometimes we get around family members and maybe haven't seen them in a long time, maybe even once a year or once every few years or decades, and for some reason they can really rile us up. They have certain hooks in us, or we use a colloquial expression, maybe they can push our buttons, and sometimes they bring out our worst. You're going to talk about politics, or they're going to drink too much, or they're going to be overbearing or domineering and condescending, whatever it might be, or sarcastic, things that just might set you off or tick you off. Sometimes it's mild annoyances, and sometimes it's not mild annoyances. Sometimes it's very serious. It's very upsetting. Some people are forced to be around ex-spouses who really did them wrong, or someone who molested them, or someone who beat them. It can be very difficult to know what to do. So here are a few tips that might help you during this holiday season to stay more centered, stay yourself, and be safe. The first thing is, I'm going to assume that in this video and this talk here that you're a Christian. You might not be, and so a lot of this might not apply to you, and your worldview is very different. But for the Christian out there, the first thing I would encourage you to do is, number one is, remember that you are, in fact, a Christian. Just make up your mind. Just make up your mind to act like a Christian. Make it up. That is to say, I'm going into the situation, and I will assume that like Paul says in Galatians 2:20, I've been crucified with Christ. I no longer live, but he lives in me. That is, I am a Christian foremost. No matter what conversation happens, even if I don't like it, no matter what happens, I'm going to be a Christian. I'm going to be someone do the best job I can as someone who's given their life to Jesus, which means I won't cause more problems. I'm not going to cuss people out. I'm not going to lash out. I'm not going to cause controversy. I'm not going to push buttons just because I know it's the fun thing to do and so forth. I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to be a Christian. I'm making my mind. That's very important to understand. This is not a quick, simple point. That is to say, we cannot go into situations acting like we're a victim. We have to go into a situation assuming that my behavior is up to me. And I gave my behavior to Jesus. He gave his life for me, and that's it. So I'm going to do the best job I can with his help, of course, to be a Christian no matter what. The second thing I would say is get ready. That is to say, if you know that something is probably going to push your buttons, a situation or a person, you know what's probably going to happen. So what I would say is get ready for it. There are a couple things I'd say about that particularly. One is that when we get ready for that event that's coming up or that conversation we might not like, it can decrease our anxiety. You might still feel a bit anxious, but at least you're not surprised. You go into it, you know what, so-and-so's probably going to bring up president or this or that, and I probably get worked up. I know it's going to come, so I'm not going to let that get the best of me. I choose not to get bothered by their comments about my weight. I choose not to be bothered by their sarcasm or what I'm going to choose. I know it's coming. In fact, it's going to come, and then it's going to go away. It's going to pass. I know it's going to happen. I'm not going to be that surprised anymore. When that happens, you let go of false expectations that other people need to have for you. The false expectation that they're going to be better. Now, what if they are better, David? Well, fantastic. What a great Christmas treat or Thanksgiving treat or whatever. But I would assume they're not going to be different. And that way, you're not looking for the negative. What I'm saying is you're preparing yourself for saying, you know what, they'll probably be that way. It might not be. That's cool. If it is, I'm going to let that bounce off me. I'm not going to be, whatever. And so I let go of the expectation that we have of other people to be different than who they are. And also let's let go of the expectation that you have to be shocked. Oh my goodness, I can't believe they're still talking that way. They're still racist. They're still this. I'm not going to do that anymore. And when you think ahead, if you can prepare for conversations, and this is where it's good to role play with a friend or a family member, if you have someone, or a therapist, to say, you know, when I go in there, Mom always talks about the way my clothes are. They don't fit just right. She's going to come up and just nitpick it. Or she's going to go in there and say, you didn't cook that right. Or you're not doing this right, and I just know. And so you can role play with the person and say, okay, they say that. They come and say, your house is so dusty. Well, then what are you going to say about that? What would you say? Well, you can say, I'm going to do my shirt the way I want to do it. I'm going to be a rebel. I'm going to get some dust and throw in their face. Well, I wouldn't do that at all. That shows they have all the power over you. The point is, you can think ahead to say, what would I do in that situation? What would be the right thing to do if I get too worked up? Well, I can do things. I can take a break. I can take a breath. I'll talk about that more in a second. That is, I'm going to prepare for this. Well, if they get worked up by the way and they're nitpicking, I'm going to say, yeah, I expected that. And then I'm going to let that go because I don't care. I mean, I care, but I don't care. I'm not going to let that ruin my whole Christmas break because so-and-so is nitpicky. It's not worth all that. That's my life, and I can't get this time back. So my point is, getting prepared for it is not getting yourself riled up. It's saying, yeah, it's probably going to happen, and if it does, I'm going to let it go, or here's what I might say. If it's more severe than doing the dishes and food and dust, but really, like you've been molested or someone really triggers you, I do encourage you to talk to a Christian counselor, and you can get proper tools and to process the deep anxiety or fear you might have. And sometimes you do, of course, have to remove yourself from situations where a person is very toxic, or certainly if they're abusive to you. So get prepared for that, and that's okay. But being ready ahead of time will really help you, that's for sure. So what are some things you might do? Can you stay in a different hotel room? Can you have to stay at that house or that apartment or that trailer? Can you stay somewhere else? If they're that bothersome, can you eat in a different room? What are some ways to get out of situations that are just too difficult to be in? You, again, think ahead. That we'll go in the situation. I know a woman who wanted to be with her family very badly, but the family was very dysfunctional. But she wanted to go to this one location. I said, well, can you go to that location and not be with them every second? She goes, well, yeah. I'm like, well, so you get all the benefits you want of that location, a vacation spot, but not have to be so close with them all the time. She goes, right. I said, so you could limit your exposure to them, choose to do it at a meal or two, but you could spend all your other time at the beach or whatever. She goes, well, yeah, well, there you go. Sometimes just thinking ahead and brainstorming can take away a lot of the fear and anxiety, which is very unnecessary, of course. The third thing I'd say is this: figure out if there's anything whatsoever that you do that makes the problem worse. Is there anything you do? Now think about that for a second. Do you roll your eyes? Oh. All right. Do you push buttons? Do you bring up that conversation on purpose? Do you exacerbate it? What do you do anything whatsoever that makes the situation worse? If you do, you need to stop. Remember, that's not how Jesus interacted with people. He didn't go up to people and say, I know this really bothers you, so he just didn't push buttons. He didn't rile people up. That's just not what he did. So you need to be the Christian adult in the room who does not make the situation worse. You don't need to. You don't need to fight. You don't need to argue about the subject. You don't need to. And so if you do that, if you are the person who makes it worse, you need to stop it. You need to apologize immediately and then stop doing it. You need to stop doing it. You own it. You know what? And if someone brings up, you're always the one, blah, blah, in the past. Remember the time 20 years ago? Okay, you're right. 20 years ago, I did do that, and that was wrong, and I should not have done that, and I apologize. I really do apologize. And then I stop doing it. You cuss just as bad as I do. Well, no, I used to, but not anymore. And I'm not used to drink as much as I do. Well, not anymore. And so, yeah, I used to, but not anymore. Whatever it is. But that's the third thing is figure out if there's anything you're doing, if there is, and don't do it anymore. The fourth thing I would say is, and this is all these are really important, you need to let go of the desire to change the person. Your job description on earth is not to change people. It's not to control them. So you need to be real careful when you go into life, but certainly when you go to the holidays. My job this holiday season is not to make sure mom is not so bickery. My job is to make sure my uncle talks more nicely to his wife. My job is to make sure everyone's happy. No, it's not. My job is to make sure so-and-so is not such a racist. No, it's not. It's just not. When you have the expectation that it's your job to change them or fix them, you won't say change, it'll be fix them, correct them, then you have a false expectation. See, I'm convinced, biblically speaking, God doesn't even control people. Well, why are you trying to do something God even doesn't try to do? And so we have to, well, no, I don't. Well, think about it very deeply. If you're really, really bothered by someone that's really, really frustrating you, I guarantee you at some level it's because you expect something from them they're not giving to you. That's what frustrates us. You expect something from them they're not giving to us. You cut me off in traffic and I'm frustrated. Why am I frustrated? Because I didn't expect you to do that. I didn't want you to do that. You violated something I wanted. You didn't do something I wanted, and I'm frustrated at you. I'm mad. And so that's what happens at family gatherings. I expect that person to get better. I expect him to so-and-so. I expect him to grow up and get it and stop the addiction or whatever it might be. And I'd say is, I would stop all that. Your job, God did not put you on the planet to fix everybody and change everybody. He fixes people when they surrender to him. but you don't have to. That's not your job. So one of the reasons why you might be so frustrated in the holiday season is the false belief that it's your job to fix the person. Let it go. I would release that need, release that expectation, period. I would just release it. It's just not in your job description to fix the person. So instead of trying to focus on them and trying to change them and fix them, instead, my next point is I would get your healthy needs met by people outside of those dysfunctional relationships. So when you have basic healthy friendships with people, and certainly if you're a Christian, tends to be easier. You have a community in place and so forth, ideally people with whom you can be somewhat close to at least. They can love you unconditionally, encourage you, build into you, and then, of course, even challenge you, but they do so from a place of complete safety. So that is to say, when I have my nutrients met, when I get good food at other parts of my life, when I go to the holiday season around family members and I feel pretty healthy and full on my own food, I don't need that from them. And it really takes away my neediness. I'm filled up, as it were. I feel better. I go into it going, yeah, if they're irritable, they're not very nice to me, then that's a bummer. I don't like it. But I'm not that torn up because I have plenty of friends who are not like this or so forth. You might feel sad about that fact. Mom and dad are mean to you, whatever, or you don't have one. That's understandable. But that's why outside of that event, you're going to your own counseling and journaling and crying and grieving and whatever. That way, in the moment, you're not trying to get needs met by them. And if you are trying to get needs met by them, you will keep trying to change them. So again, that's why these go together. When you get your own healthy needs met in healthy ways, not from them, then you don't try to change them. You go, yeah, that's the way they are. That's just the way they are. You say, well, David, I'm not trying to change people. I have my own health. Well, that's not true if you're really frustrated with them all the time. I get an analogy often. If I'm walking down the street and I see a homeless person, they start saying, you don't do your laundry right, or you're this, or they're cussing me out, or whatever my case. Well, I don't like hearing it, but I'm not that bothered. Why? Because I don't have any needs from them. I don't need the homeless man or woman to be so sweet to me, and I'm not a little fragile flower that needs every single person to like everything I do. Well, no, I have friends for that, and a close, loving relationship with my wife, and of course the Lord Jesus, and so I don't have expectation. I go, whatever. I wouldn't start weeping. I wouldn't be so frustrated that homeless man said those evil things about me. Who does he think he is? But that's exactly what we do with in-laws, our siblings, our mom and dad. The difference is not about what the words they said, it's what you needed from them and what you expected from them. What I'm saying is when you get your healthy needs met outside of those dysfunctional relationships, you don't need it so much for them. You go, yeah, that's the way they are. I used to be very sad about that, but I grieved it. Now they're like a homeless person in that regard. Another point is, if there's anything at all with this in the situation or with this person or people with whom you're having conversation, is there anything whatsoever that's positive or likable that you could talk about? Anything. And I mean, anything. Maybe it's the movie upon which this shirt is based. And if you know that movie, you get extra crown in heaven. Maybe you can watch that movie together and laugh sillily. Maybe you can talk about Jesus with a person, or a vacation, or a favorite sports team. Is there anything at all, not just agreeable, which is important, but that you like about the person? So these go together. On the one hand, is there a conversation you can do with whom you can have that you can get along with the person? The other hand is, of course, is there something likable about the person you could focus on? But both are positive things. One is the conversation, one is what you choose to focus on. So we all know people that you might like aspects about the person and other aspects about the person that frustrate the snot out of you, and you go, I'm working on my frustration, or I just really don't like that part of the person. Maybe I'm not very frustrated, but I don't like when they say those words, or whatever it is, or they drink too much. If what you do is what we call splitting. Splitting is I only look at the positive or only look at the negative. That's not good. Healthy people integrate. So what you want to do is accept the person as both negative and positive, as good and bad. That's what we should do with ourselves as well. We're not all bad and we're not all good, that's for sure, in our behavior. And so, but what happens is if you find yourself and you have your buttons pushed all the time by relatives or whatever, you might be very tempted, or you are, splitting them and only choosing to look at the negative. Well, that's not healthy. And that's because they are not, even the worst, are not Satan incarnate. They can be used by Satan. But the point is there anything whatsoever likable about them? And I mean, think of the way they dress, the cologne he uses, the way she sings. I mean, I don't, is there anything at all? Well, that's something you could think about. That's also something you could talk about, even brag about it. Man, I really like how you do, so it's really good. I'm telling you what, everyone likes to be bragged on. They might try to reject it, but at least it's not being attacked, and that's very different. The last thing I would say is this, and that is, if you need to take a break, take a break. Take a break. If that conversation gets out of hand, there's fighting, yelling, arguing, go on a walk. Go to a different room. Go back to your hotel room. Put some headphones in. Go on the front porch and sit there and pray. Of course, for the Christian, I would say is get away for a little bit, take some deep breaths. Remind yourself, I'm getting worked up because this is triggering my past, and I've this pattern, and I'm expecting them to be better, but they're not, and I've still did it. Come to think of it, this is a good reminder. I'm getting so worked up. It's a good reminder that I still have some grieving to do. It still makes me very sad, or I get very angry when so-and-so says so-and-so because I've heard it all my life or whatever. Use that as an opportunity to be thankful for it and pray and take a break. Breaks are okay. Take a break. You're not trying to be an isolationist, because if you do that, if you're always running away every time you get anxious, you're teaching yourself to be afraid of anxiety. You don't want to do that. You don't want to develop the phobia. What I mean is, if it's too much, you just need a break then. You don't need to, of course, I'm a big fan of not smoking, killing my body, so I wouldn't run off for a cigarette, You run off and do healthy things like take deep breaths. And say very self-compassionate things to yourself like, yep, this is difficult. So-and-so is very controlling, and they're trying to control me now, and it's always bother you. You're self-compassionate. You say loving things to yourself. And then you pray, Lord Jesus, help me, help me, help me. Back to number one, act like a Christian in this situation. Because maybe I want to lash out, or I want to run away, or what, but I don't want to run away. I don't want to be driven by fear, and I don't want to be driven by hatred and rage. I don't want to do that at all. And so, and on top of that, Jesus, you said, of course, in Matthew and Luke 6, love your enemies. And so I don't pick and choose the people I love. And love doesn't mean like them. You don't have to like them. It means I care for their good. But again, sometimes you need a break. It's okay to take a break. But what it's not okay to do is then make up your mind to always be afraid of that person forever. Now, if it's really intense, you might need some therapy. That's fine. Get the therapy work. That's a real deal. Sometimes fear is really, really powerful. But we don't, in general, we don't want to run off. And two, we don't want to make decisions based on anger, rage, fear, and so forth. We want to be as present as we can, as loving as we can as possible, while acknowledging we might feel things. Okay, you might feel nervous, you might feel frustrated, but those feelings don't control your lips, right? You do. And so we don't want to sit back as a victim and say, it doesn't matter. What do you expect me to do? I'm going to start. You yell at me, I'm going to yell at you. And well, that's okay. That's not the way of Jesus. It's just not the way of Jesus. And so we take deep breaths, calm down, take the break if you need to, ask God for help to do it the right way. Those are my tips for you during this holiday season. If you find yourself in dysfunctional relationships, go watch this movie if you can. Not every bit of it. Some parts are inappropriate, but it's still pretty funny. Or go watch Elf, or do something fun. Remember, this season does not have to be one of dread and horror show. It doesn't. Even if your own people are very difficult, it doesn't have to be. God can help you. He can and wants to help you love people who are not easy to love. And praise God, He might be answering another person's prayer request of that about you. God bless you, and I'll see you next time.